and Ryan to talk about emissions and resilience adaptation. Yeah, for B1.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. For B1, we've introduced the definition that we have. Thank you. Okay. For B1, we introduced the definition that we have that looked both at emissions and resilience. And we got quite a lot of feedback. We had a few questions that we asked about. The first one was about the principles that we are looking at. And some of the responses that we got there also looked at the importance of combining the conversation around emissions and the conversation around resilience. And then a third part that was also brought up in this conversation was also around sufficiency. So the functionality of a building and whether or not it's serving the function that it needs to be serving also came up. Then we talked about measurement tools, standards, thresholds, and benchmarks. And we received quite a lot of input on that. And we're going to be scrolling through and sifting through the data next. And then the third thing is we talked about the challenges that countries face and what type of support they would need. And for these challenges, the challenges really and the support that's needed was really around approaching this in a systematic approach, approaching the near zero emission building and resilient buildings with a systematic approach. So looking at how the different policies and incentivizing tools and standards and implementation tools work with each other. So that was the summary for the emissions piece, and I'll hand over to Ryan for the resilience.
Thanks, Mona. As Mona mentioned, we sort of did a parallel track relative to the resilience side of the definition, again, sort of recognizing that intersection of near zero emissions and resilient buildings as a collective approach that we really need to address both of those holistically. And so we did go through and present the definition, which will be sort of part of a consultation that we hope all of you will contribute to assure that we captured appropriately sort of where folks should be starting from relative to definition for near zero emission and resilient buildings, but then really sort of took that step back and said, okay, what are the principles that we need to incorporate into sort of the next steps flowing from that definition? And so really sort of recognizing the local context, local needs relative to hazard assessments and risks, but also recognizing that buildings don't sit in isolation. They actually sit within communities and really looking at the importance of intersections with social, economic, and environmental aspects of communities as well, being able to capture that in sort of multiple different ways. And then we talked a little bit about sort of metrics and indicators around resilience. Really had some challenges of how do you actually sort of measure resilience, unlike sort of the emissions piece where you do have, sort of highly measurable, whether that's utility meters or sort of embodied emissions measurements, sort of the resilience strategies, measurements, and indicators are a little more challenging to actually sort of pinpoint. And so certainly a lot of work needed in that space to better identify the indicators, which then also sort of leads to challenges in sort of the implementation at the country level. So identifying a few sort of different areas of work and need, capacity building certainly being a piece of that, financing and investment and building value around resilience, another key piece of that. But then also having sort of the tools, strategies, and regulatory approaches that actually make that effective. And so certainly looking for continued input from folks as Work Group 1 continues to move forward in addressing these challenges. So look forward to your input on the definitions, and certainly as we continue to move forward in addressing sort of the needs and opportunities within the standards and certification space. So I think I'm going to turn it over to the folks from Priority Action Area 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about Priority Action 2 on demand creation. The work is that we are doing from the One Planet Network and in alignment with the Priority Action is a global framework for action to harness circular and sustainable public procurement for and serves. And within this framework for action, we have co-created through a series of consultations along the construction value chain, but also the procurement value chain, 5 common and broad principles. As said, well, a menu of actions that can help operationalize and implement these common principles. So we had 2 rounds of discussion. First one, well, to leverage the work the hubs are doing. The first one was with the Market Transformation Hub, and the second one was with the Clean Heat Forum. So in the first round of discussion, we understand that capacity building is a very important component in Priority Action 2, how training mostly local governments is very important because they're actually the ones that are implementing the projects and they need to know what do we mean by low carbon requirements or near zero requirements. And also something very interesting that came up from this conversation that was that communities are part of the value chain. So communities should be involved and they are a very important part that will drive this demand. Just to summarize on the second discussion about clean heat and energy efficiency, it's very important to have a good understanding of life cycle costing, of what is a performance-based approach to an energy efficient building for both existing and new buildings, and work starting on that, and then understand what kind of technologies, if any, are necessary for this end. So I want to close this part, inviting all of you. This actions menu we are creating is a living document, and I want to invite all of you to get in touch with the One Planet Network. We can have a quick chat if you're interested on demand creation, and we are happy to receive your feedback. Thank you. And I give the floor to Priority Action 3.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Anna Zinnecker. I'm co-chairing Finance Hub together with IFC. And we just had a very interactive discussion. So we kind of like got everyone to talk and discuss what could really be very important activities under the Buildings Breakthrough. It's very tough to summarize, and I thank Rudolf for doing a great job, but still I think I'll just be able to give you a few really key points. So I think the first point was to really contextualize, because we got everyone to talk. We also realized things are really different in different corners of the world, and it's really important to contextualize, starting from the wording, no? Because I think like that carbon rational or the green buildings rational might play out really differently in different contexts. And then we thought about what's the 4, let's say, favorite activities that we identified in the group. Okay. I'm almost doing a York, and and a big thank you in the meantime to Victor Pianet, who co-facilitated into York for the second round. Great. I hope the next person has the same height. Great. So I think one of the activities was the question on risk assessments in financing, where the question was like, whose role should it actually be? Is it kind of with the investors, with the financiers, or should it actually be communities and municipalities? So I think journey is out. The question is just, I think what we often forget is the question that like many of the communities most at risk are the ones that don't access the usual, kind of commercial types of financing. We had an interesting discussion on taxonomies, and I'm just going to upset a bit the group on certification and standards, because there was a bit of a discussion saying maybe they should really not be the same. So it makes sense to have very different taxonomies in different countries. Also very important and also very controversial, but I'll just report it, to not set the bar too high to shrink the market too much. So I think there's a sweet spot that we need to hit to be able to do that. Then we had two last points. So one was on the question of like how to de-risk investments and how to set incentive structures. We did realize there's a lot of good facilities that do that already. And I think there was interesting examples. And I think we even had people heading to the coffee break saying we should develop something together. So the question is, how do we get to upscaling? And we'll see. We might include that in the buildings breakthrough on finance. And as the last one, the request on could there be matchmaking between the funds that are out there and the projects that come from, let's say, the local level, the country level. Here also, we said there's a lot of very different actors involved and they might not speak the same language. So I think, first of all, understanding what's out there is really important. And then I think it's more than just saying it's there. It's the question of like, how can you actually come from a good idea to a project that's like fundable? And I think that takes a bit more than just a conversation. But I think, yeah, we take that as homework to see how to bridge that gap in terms of skills, but also I think resources in terms of firming ideas up. Super difficult to sum up a very good discussion, but so I would like to thank the two groups. It was great. And yeah, homework for us to see what of that gets done. And I hand over to research.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it says new. So indeed, this is a new topic that we discussed. And actually, the topics we discussed are already mentioned here. So what are research priorities? What are research gaps? What are existing networks? And I think we can summarize the discussion with 3 W questions. So who should be involved, and I would not repeat this here, but we can then just condense this in writing. We identified existing networks, and there is already a lot out there, but I would like to invite you all to send us, and if I say us, that's either me or Asin who is supporting, or just to GlobalABC, to Dima, and then she will forward it to us, existing initiatives, because that's what we said. We do not want to reinvent the wheel. Then we identified topics around the what do we want to focus on when we do research. So for example, that was, thank you so much, that was, for example, material neutrality, externalities of infrastructure. Also, how do we deal with existing buildings? Can you then please change? And also the finance sector, where do I need to look? Also, this is actually what you manage, risk management is related to research. Also contextualization, it was also mentioned already. That is then more a question, how do we do the research? So we can conduct research on materials, but it might be different in different climatic zones. It might be different in different political regimes. There might be different materials. So these are basically the 3 areas we discussed. Who is already there? These are the existing networks. Then what are the topics like material science, for example, also behavioral science, and then the how, that would be the context matters. Also how in terms of that we look at system science, that we connect different trade-offs and look at side effects that might evolve, but also topics like customer acceptance. You can do good research and be really convinced it's better from the environmental perspective, better from the economic perspective, but then it's not, there's no uptake. So therefore this question of how then remains. So who, what, and how were our three areas, how we will then also cluster our results of the discussion in the report. Thank you very much. And I hope I was in time.
To myself, thank you. I will keep it concise as it's that time of day. I think there's a consensus that we need to act. Gulnara Roll this morning said, I think we need to translate knowledge towards actually improving quality of life. I think there's a consensus that solutions exist as well. I think Jonathan said that this morning. And they are being successfully deployed, but we need to spotlight them. And this is the work that we're undertaking in B4.2. Some of you might be familiar, and actually, funnily enough, I heard someone laughing there. The reason we split research and deployment into two is because we firmly believe that we're now in a phase of scaling solutions, and we need to implement and we need to act. So some of you might be familiar with the blueprint for a solutions deployment platform, which we launched at COP29. The catalogue of solutions, which is our deliverable that's been mentioned a couple of times this afternoon, is what we will be launching at COP30, which will elaborate on that work, and it will highlight key proven solutions that are being implemented across multiple geographies. And the idea of this is to highlight case studies that have been successful across multiple regions, to present the technologies and the solutions, but also to highlight the enabling environment. What are examples of policies that have favored the deployment of these solutions? What are financial instruments that are in place that can favor the deployment of such solutions? And our entire workshop revolved around this question. It was titled From Words to Walls, is how do we bridge the gap between a guide, a document, a PDF, to an actual deployment? What information do you need as adopters in order to move forward, in order to build confidence through such a resource that you will actually take it forward? So we had some really interesting discussions throughout our session about peer-to-peer learning. So if you know that someone similar to yourself has achieved it, has done it successfully, how it was financed, what were the outcomes, then this is a way that we can really build confidence with such a resource. Secondly is proving that it's cost effective. A point that was made was highlighting dollar but cost per ton of CO2 saved. So this is something kind of a standardized, quantified approach to the solutions that we put forward. But I highlighted two calls to action that I wanted to echo for this contribution. One, if you have case studies that you would like to contribute to such a catalogue, please come speak to me at the Dresden City Hall or after this, and I would be happy to onboard those, whether that's examples of policies, if you're representing countries, financial instruments, successfully deployed technologies, please do reach out. And I would echo that we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. I've got a list as long as my arm of different hubs that I've heard of today that I think will have already undertaken work that we can then reuse. So this is the first point, is please share your existing resources, your case studies. The second being that we need you to be ambassadors of such a resource, because we don't want to create another guide, something that's launched at COP and that remains on a shelf. The idea is that we create a practical tool, and for that to work, we need the relay to be effective, for it to end up in the hands of those who are actually adopting these solutions. And we need you to support the relay and the deployment of this tool that we'll be putting forward. So these are my two main points, but the workshop was very interactive. It was a pleasure, and I'm available if anyone would like to contribute further. Thank you. And I'll pass the floor to B5, Judy. You can wrap things up. Thank you.
is this on? I'm not going to stand still. This is the first time that it's been great to be last, because there are more people in this room than there were when we started, but I don't know if you're all awake. So please wake up, and I'm going to do a quick summary of B5, which is about capacity building. And we have two pillars: institutional capacity building and personnel capacity building. Mostly when people talk about capacity building, they're talking about skills, training, the personnel side of that. We need lots of that. We also need the capacity to enforce building regulations that lead to NZERBs. And so that is departments, framework criteria for assessing competence, methodologies that need to be implemented by governments. And so what we are aiming to do by COP30 is to come up with an online portal that is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It is a starting point for governments around the world to go and figure out if, once they've identified a need, whether it's an institutional need or a personnel need, to see, has someone else already addressed this need? And maybe it's in a different language, or maybe it's not completely properly contextualized, but at least it's a starting point, and you don't have to start from scratch to develop whatever that capacity tool is. So we have, over the course of the last year, identified approximately 71 skill areas, or training needs, or developmental needs, and that's too many to start out with. So we have undergone a process over the last couple of months talking with the governments, the national representatives to B5, to understand what their priorities are. And through those discussions, we've narrowed it down to 9 institutional capacity needs, 9 personnel capacity needs. And the purpose of our session today was to get a little bit more input, make sure that we're not missing anything that's a high priority for anybody in the room. And we're happy to take everyone's input on that. We do have a resource that, if you go to that link when you see these slides, there's an interim report and there's a method to give feedback. And we're still happy to take feedback. The resource, the online portal that we launch at COP30 will be a first stage starting point. So there'll still be lots of opportunity to say, hey, we're missing something, and we have a tool that you can add to this, or this is not so user friendly, but we need to start somewhere. So we're working with probably 18 categories that we'll want to populate with tools, and then we'll want to get feedback at COP30. So that's where we are. We got some really good feedback. Always happy to have more. And if you're interested in talking about institutional or personnel capacity building, come see me. I'll be around this evening and all day tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Judy and everybody. I really want to thank all the facilitators of the priority actions who are leading on the areas, that worked on so much on this, on getting us where we are today. I think it's also important for the GlobalABC community to understand what's happening in the space and to contribute. All of you members are what constitute the GlobalABC hubs and the action groups. And we need to leverage this expertise as much as possible, and the products that are already within these hubs and action groups as much as possible, and feed into the different priority actions wherever it's relevant, of course. So thanks so much for your engagement. And I think everyone is tired and is ready for tomorrow. Tonight, before tomorrow. Malia will speak more about this.
So, thank you everyone for today. I will kindly invite you to join us at the reception, which is at the Rout House